From the back of the hall, I watched Captain Thorne, the officer who signed my death warrant, deliver my eulogy. The air was thick, with the scent of polished wood and cheap funeral flowers. His voice, practiced and somber, filled the silence with carefully chosen words like valor and unflinching sacrifice. He painted a hero's death for the crowd of starched uniforms, and for my family, their faces a blur of grief in the front row. They believed every lie that fell from his lips. I stood there, a ghost in the shadows, letting the narrative play out. His eyes scanned the room, a politician's habit. For a moment they passed right over me, seeing nothing. Then, a flicker of confusion. He paused mid-sentence. His gaze snapped back, locking onto mine. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just let him see me. I saw the recognition crash over him, followed by a wave of pure, undiluted terror. The paper in his hand began to tremble, a small, satisfying tremor that was only for me. His face, usually a mask of cold confidence, drained of all color. He knew. In that moment, I wasn't in the hall anymore. I was back in the dust and the fire. 2 years ago felt like yesterday. The ringing in my ears after the explosion, the frantic shouts over the radio. I was pinned down, laying down cover fire, my exit route gone. I remember screaming my status into the radio, my voice raw. And then I heard him, my captain, his tone as calm and clear as if he were ordering lunch. Call sign Ghost is compromised. I'm calling it. She's Kia. All units RTB now. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. My screams for him to wait were met with a burst of static as my comms were cut. The world went silent, except for the fading whump 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 of the evac chopper leaving me behind in a city that wanted me dead. He didn't just leave me, he erased me. He declared me a martyr so he wouldn't have to report a failure. He left me for dead to secure a promotion and a clean after-action report. He never imagined that a ghost could find her way home. To understand the reckoning that was about to unfold, you have to understand what it takes to survive when you're already a name on a wall. Months after I had clawed my way back to a state of quasi-existence, I sat in a cold, damp basement and watched my own funeral. The video was grainy, downloaded from a public news feed onto a cracked laptop screen that was my only window to the world I'd lost. I saw the honor guard, the perfect folds in the flag, and the crisp salutes. I watched Captain Thorne, his face a perfect mask of solemn duty, present that flag to my mother. He spoke of my bravery, my sacrifice, and the tough but necessary call he had to make. Every word was a carefully polished stone laid upon my grave, and I felt a rage so cold it burned. The camera panned to his superior, General Marcus, my commanding officer, a man who respected protocol above all else, a man who saw the world in regulations and reports. He stood there, stoic and official, nodding grimly at Thorne's words. He had signed off on the after-action report, the official document that turned Thorne's lie into history. The general wasn't a monster. He was just a man who trusted the system. And the system had failed, because it had trusted a man who had none of my blood on his hands, but all of the guilt. They were all mourning a hero, a symbol. They weren't mourning me, because I was still alive. The reality of those first few months was a universe away from that pristine ceremony. There was no honor, only grit and survival. I spent weeks moving only at night. Every shadow a potential enemy, every sound a threat. My elite training wasn't for a mission anymore. It was for finding water that wouldn't kill me. For setting a broken bone in my own arm with nothing but a stick and strips of my uniform. I learned the taste of desperation, the profound animalistic will to simply see another sunrise. My world wasn't one of glory, it was the smell of rot and fear, and the constant, gnawing ache of being utterly alone. My first breakthrough came from a ghost story. a half-forgotten briefing about old Cold War contingency plans. I made my way to a forgotten city district and activated a sleeper asset, not some slick secret agent, but a weary old shopkeeper who owed a debt to a country that no longer existed. He looked at me like he'd seen the dead walk, and in a way, he had. He gave me food, a place to hide, and access to a terminal. From there, I found the location of a dead drop, a waterproof cache hidden years ago by another operative. Inside was a small amount of cash, a set of clean identity papers, and an encrypted communication device. It wasn't a rescue. It was a fighting chance. For months, I was a ghost, a digital phantom gathering whispers. I had one shot to reach out. One person who might believe the impossible. My fingers trembled as I typed the encrypted message, a single coded question sent to a secure server I prayed he still monitored. I sent it, and then I waited. For 3 days, there was only silence. I thought that maybe he was gone, or maybe he wouldn't risk it. I was about to scrub the device and disappear for good when a reply finally came through. A simple, 2-word answer that felt like the first breath of air after nearly drowning. "You're late." It was Deckard, my former teammate, a man who was pulled from that same firestorm with a leg full of shrapnel and a medical discharge. He was the only other person who knew the chaos of those last moments, who had heard the frantic edge in my voice over the comms. He was the only one I could trust. In a series of carefully coded exchanges, he told me everything. Thorne had been awarded a medal for his leadership during the operation. He had received a fast-tracked promotion to major. His career was skyrocketing. Deckard's words confirmed my darkest suspicions. "I never believed the AAR," he wrote. "The timings were wrong. He called you Kia way too fast. He wanted you gone." Deckard agreed to be my eyes and ears, my anchor in a world that thought I was gone forever. The injustice of it all settled in my bones, no longer a hot fury, but a cold, hard weight. Thorne was building a career on my tombstone, and for 2 years I let him. Because you don't fight a man like that with emotion. You fight him with his own system. You become the error in the code he can't delete. My rage had cooled, solidifying into something far more dangerous, a purpose. The raw, desperate need for revenge is a fire that consumes you, and I couldn't afford to burn out. What I needed was a correction. I decided then that I wouldn't seek some emotional confrontation or a vigilante's justice. Thorne was a product of the system, a man who respected rank and protocol above all else. So, I would use that very system, its rigid rules and unbending procedures, to dismantle him piece by piece. My return wouldn't be an accusation. It would be a formal, undeniable refutation of an official record. For over a year, Deckard and I worked in the shadows. He was my lifeline, a steady presence on the other side of a wall of encryption. He fed me a constant stream of information, internal memos, duty rosters, base security protocols. Every file he sent was another piece of the puzzle, another nail for Thorne's coffin. We meticulously built a picture of Thorne's new life, his promotions, his accolades. Then, one night, the perfect opportunity appeared in my inbox. It was an official base to wide announcement for a 2nd anniversary memorial. They were dedicating a new training hall. In my name. The sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. General Marcus himself was slated to give the keynote. It was perfect, a high-profile event on their turf, surrounded by the very institution they thought I had died for. My plan wasn't one of violence or stealth in the traditional sense. It was a procedural infiltration. In the chaos of reporting my death, some low-level administrative details had been overlooked. My biometric data on an old, seldom-used network at a different base was never fully purged. It was a digital ghost, a loophole just wide enough for me to slip through. I used it to access the system for just a few seconds, long enough to authorize a new set of dog tags for myself. I wasn't going to sneak onto that base. I was going to walk right through the front gate. The strategy was simple. I would be a silent attendee. I wouldn't be an attacker or an accuser. I would be a living, breathing piece of evidence. My presence alone would be the weapon, forcing a public reckoning that Thorn couldn't escape. There would be no denying the truth when it was standing right in front of them, wearing its own name around its neck. He was about to give a speech about my sacrifice in a building bearing my name. He had no idea the ghost he created was on the guest list, and she was coming home to correct the record. The memorial hall was exactly as I had imagined it, impersonal, formal, and full of ghosts. My ghost, in particular, was everywhere. She was in the hushed whispers of the attendees, in the solemn music playing softly over the speakers, and in the large, polished portrait of my official photograph displayed on an easel near the stage. The woman in that picture looked so young, her expression serious, and full of a future she was never supposed to have. From my position at the back, I watched my parents in the front row, their shoulders slumped with a grief that had been a constant companion for 2 long years. On the stage sat the top brass, including General Marcus, his posture rigid and uncompromising. And then Major Thorn, the man of the hour, stepped up to the podium. He looked every bit the hero they believed him to be. His uniform was immaculate. His medals gleamed under the stage lights, and his expression was a carefully rehearsed blend of strength and sorrow. He began his speech, his voice smooth and resonant, hitting all the right notes. He spoke of duty, of the harsh realities of our profession, and of the day he lost his finest soldier. He told the story he had perfected over 2 years, a lie so polished it shone like the truth. As he spoke my name, he looked directly at my parents and offered them a sad, respectful smile. The performance was flawless. He was basking in the warmth of a fire he had lit with my life. I decided it was time to make him feel the cold. I shifted my weight, just a fraction, but it was enough. His eyes, sweeping the room for dramatic effect, finally found me. The practiced words caught in his throat. He stopped mid-sentence. A faint, confused murmur rippled through the audience. I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped the sides of the podium, his only anchor in a world that had just tilted off its axis. He squinted, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. He tried to restart his speech, but the words were gone. All that came out was a dry, cracking whisper, amplified by the microphone to every corner of the hall. "Anya." The murmur in the crowd grew louder. People started turning, following his terrified gaze. General Marcus looked up from his program, his face a mask of annoyance at the interruption. His eyes followed Thorn's, and when they landed on me, the annoyance froze, replaced by a deep, profound confusion. The entire room was now looking back and forth between the stage, the portrait, and the ghost standing at the back. I knew this was the moment. All the planning, the hiding, the surviving, it all came down to this single deliberate action. I took one step forward, then another, moving out of the shadows and into the main aisle. The crowd parted for me as if by instinct. I did not shout. I did not run. I walked with a calm, measured pace until I was standing in the center of the hall, my gaze fixed not on the traitor at the podium, but on the commanding officer on the stage. In a voice that was clear, steady, and stripped of all emotion except for a soldier's duty, I made my report. "Sergeant Anya Sharma, service number 7-5-3-9, reporting for duty, sir." Absolute silence descended upon the hall. It was as if no one dared to breathe. I saw my mother's hands fly to her mouth, my father's face contorted in disbelief and a dawning impossible hope. Every eye was on General Marcus. I watched his face cycle through a lifetime of emotions in a few seconds. Disbelief, shock, a flicker of something, like fear, and then it all hardened into the cold, sharp fury of a commander who has been betrayed. He understood. This wasn't an illusion or a cruel joke. This was a catastrophic failure of his command, a lie that had been allowed to fester right under his nose. Thorn, now completely exposed, began to unravel. He stammered, pointing a shaking finger at me. You were supposed to be dead." I never took my eyes off the general. My response was ice cold, a simple statement of fact that was more damning than any accusation could ever be. The report was in error. That was all it took. The general rose to his feet, his movement so sharp and sudden that people in the front row flinched. He didn't look at me. He pointed a single, trembling finger at the man at the podium, and his voice, honed by decades of command, boomed through the hall, shaking the very foundation of Thorn's world. "Major, you will be escorted to my office, now." He had built his entire career on a 3-letter word, Kia, in the end. It only took 3 of my own to tear it all down, reporting for duty. The moment Thorn was escorted from the hall, the stunned silence shattered. It wasn't panic, but a kind of controlled chaos, as officers began speaking into radios. And my parents rushed towards me, their faces a chaotic mess of tears and disbelief. I was quickly and quietly guided away from the crowd and into a secure debriefing room. A few minutes later, General Marcus entered, closing the door behind him. The fury on his face was palpable, a cold, hard anger directed not at me but at the system and the man that had failed so spectacularly. He didn't sit. He just stood there, looking at me with an expression I had never seen before. A mixture of profound shock, deep regret, and a soldier's grudging awe. For the next 4 hours, I talked. I gave him the real after-action report, the one I had replayed in my mind 1,000 times in the dark. I detailed every decision, every bullet fired, and the exact moment Thorn made the call to abandon me. I laid out my entire 2-year journey, the escape, the survival, the slow and methodical process of becoming a ghost with a purpose. He listened without interruption, his face a stone mask, but his eyes showed the full weight of the truth landing on him. When I finished, he simply nodded, once. The investigation, he said, was already underway. It would be immediate, and it would be absolute. Justice wasn't just coming, it was already here. The wheels of military justice, once they finally started turning, were swift and absolute. 6 months later, the proceedings against Thorn concluded. The court-martial was less of a trial and more of a formality. He was found guilty on all charges: dereliction of a sacred duty, willful, falsification of an official report, and conduct unbecoming an officer. I wasn't there to see it, but Deckard told me everything. He described the moment they stripped the medals from Thorn's chest, the sound of the fabric, tearing, the way he stood there, a hollowed-out man whose lies had finally collapsed on him. He was dishonorably discharged and sentenced to a military prison. His name, his career, his entire fabricated legacy, erased. I never returned to active field duty. You can't go through something like that and come back the same. But my war wasn't over. It had just changed. I was reassigned to a new role, a new mission. I became an instructor at the Sears School. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. My experience, once a classified secret buried in a false report, was now considered legendary, a living textbook for the next generation of soldiers. My new team wasn't a squad of operators, but fellow instructors. They didn't see me as a victim or a ghost. They saw me as the ultimate embodiment of their craft, a testament to the training that had kept me alive. Here, surrounded by people who understood, I finally found a new kind of family, one forged not in blood but in competence and mutual respect. A year after my return, I was observing a training exercise when General Marcus approached me. He stood beside me, watching the young soldiers navigate a grueling course. He never offered a formal apology. That wasn't his way. Instead, he offered something more valuable, more meaningful, professional respect. He told me the memorial hall had been officially renamed. It was now designated the Thorn Deception Instructional Wing, a permanent and public lesson in the cost of a lie and the importance of integrity. Then, he handed me a small, formal case. Inside was the rank of Staff Sergeant, a promotion I had officially earned. 2 years ago, backdated to the day before Thorn left me for dead, my legacy was no longer a name carved on a wall to hide a lie. It was a standard. They engraved my name in stone to bury a lie. I just taught them that some ghosts don't just haunt you, they come back to sign for the paperwork.